All right, everyone, let's talk. Let's talk about the violence that is being brought at peaceful rallies, protests, and prayer gatherings by Antifa. Someone told me one of them wasn't Antifa. One of them was a group, an offshoot called Black Bloc. I call them Black Bloc, whatever. Black Lives Matter. But I was very disgusted in what I saw. I am from California. I'm a California native, born and raised in California. I escaped a few years ago. I now live in Virginia. Funny that these are the two biggest states right now in the news. I was very disgusted by what I saw and what I heard in San Francisco and in Berkeley. There was a prayer rally or a prayer gathering going on in San Francisco, a gathering that was going to gather, I believe, at Golden Gate Park. And they were going to pray for the safety of our country and our president. And they actually ended up canceling the day before because they had received so many threats of violence. Antifa and these groups had threatened them to the point that they felt it was safer to just cancel the event. Before they canceled it, though, just to give you an example of how disgusting the people of San Francisco and the Bay Area are, and why I don't like California or Californians, is that these people in San Francisco were saying before the prayer group arrived, when you walk your dog through the park, just let your dog, when your dog takes a shit, don't pick it up. Leave the shit for the protesters. And I've also heard Antifa talking about, and I believe Chicago, also leaving shit in a park, a dog shit in a park, and animal feces in the park where there are Confederate statues. So this is not an uncommon thing that they're doing. They use urine and feces to attack people. So why not have your dog help? And by the way, I loved the video of that thing getting arrested. I think it was a woman, but I'm not sure. I call it a thing because today with the gender, I don't want to misgender anyone, but by calling her a female, it might have been a she-male. But, I don't want to get my pronouns wrong, but I'm sure that I might. So maybe it's safer just to call it an it. It was being walked by two police. And it was screaming for her fucking service dog. I want my fucking service dog. And I'm like, well, lady or it, you need to be investigated for animal cruelty. One, if you need a service dog, you should not be engaging in violent protests. And two, if you're taking a service dog to a violent protest, or any dog for that matter, you need to be investigated for animal cruelty. You should not be dragging your animals into places where you know there's going to be violence because you're on the side committing the violence. I'm also sick of seeing, I saw a video, I believe it was Berkeley, of an older man, a veteran, who was in a mechanical wheelchair, and the Antifa protesters surrounded him and attacked him as well. Now, I think what needs to happen is, I think if the Attorney General, I think it's Gavin Newsom, I think that's the Attorney General now, or maybe he's Lieutenant Governor now. But if the Attorney General of these states, not just in California, but in Charlottesville, if the Lieutenant Governors, if the governors do not want to investigate these mayors who are giving people stand down orders to not investigate, to tell these police to stand down. And I'm telling you, I'm getting sick and tired of seeing the police standing there doing nothing and watching people attack each other. It's not mutual combat when one group does not want to fight and engage in a fight. Your job as police, and you need to remember your oath, your job is to protect the citizens in the city in which you live in. And you're not doing your job when you stand there and you let people get beat. So you need to think about your oath and why you went into law enforcement. And if these mayors are giving stand-down orders, it needs to be reported and it needs to be investigated. And if the states are complicit in holding these mayors accountable, that it needs to go all the way up to the DOJ. Attorney General Sessions needs to send investigators to these areas to investigate these mayors and to make sure that they are keeping these cities safe. And I'm not just saying that the right, people are probably saying, oh, well, she's saying that the right wingers need protection. No, actually, I'm saying everyone needs protection. Because let's not forget that girl in Charlottesville, the only person who was killed, was not on the right. She was there with Antifa and Black Lives Matter to counter protest and to create problems. The city failed to keep people safe, including her. And if her family wants to sue, they need to sue the city of Charlottesville for not keeping their daughter safe. It's their fault. It's the mayor's fault. That mayor needs to be removed. If the attorney general or the governor was involved in telling the police to stand down, they need to be removed too. So the attorney general needs to send investigators to these cities, find out if there was a stand down order, and then get rid of these people. Bring them up on charges. Dereliction of duty. Bring them up on charges. Hold them, their freedom in jeopardy and their finances in jeopardy. I don't care if they get put behind bars or they get ruined financially, but they need to pay for what they've done. And I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about through the courts. Second, we also need to find out and have people sue, even if it's a class action lawsuit. I would like everyone who's been injured in these rallies to sue the cities in which the rallies occurred for their medical damages and for violations to their civil rights, their right to peacefully assembly and protest. They had permits, and the police, not only did they stand down in Charlottesville, not only do they stand down, but then when it's time to remove the people who are peacefully assembled, who have permits, they funnel them to the violent protesters, the Antifa, who are waiting with clubs and balloons of piss and all sorts of homemade weapons and tear gas and everything else. So I think civil rights are completely being violated here, and I think these cities have opened themselves up for lawsuits. So I would like to see the DOJ to go investigate and determine what happened, and if there were police told to stand down, that these mayors and anyone else involved need to be removed from office and charged with crimes. Now, yesterday, a 10-day march started here in Charlottesville, and I'm going to tell you what I saw. From the reports that I've seen, it's all white people who have nothing better to do. Fat white people on top of that, who I can tell you now, I mean, I'm talking most of the crowd. I'm not saying the whole crowd, but I'm talking most of the crowd. Fat, and I didn't see one black person, so fat and white. But of the fat people that are walking, these people are not going to make it to DC. What they're going to do is walk up the block and then take an Uber to DC, is what they're going to do, because these people look like they can't walk up the block without being winded. But this is called a Civil Disobedience March, so they're willing to break the law for their cause, to be violent if necessary, to destroy things, to burn things. So keep that in mind, that they're not law-abiding protesters. They plan to end in Washington, D.C., and once they're in Washington, D.C., my prediction is all hell is going to break loose. They're going to be committing violence, and the Secret Service needs to be on notice, and they need to have all hands on deck The military probably needs to be out there, or the Capitol Police. They need to have the White House and the Capitol buildings on lockdown. And I would stop the tours of those buildings. Sorry, tourists, but violence is coming to that city, and we need to keep everyone safe. You would be safe not to be in that city that day. And we need to make sure that no one hurts, that nobody crazy in these groups decides to hurt a senator or a representative or anyone in office or any of the workers there. Remember, Steve Scalise, the representative from Louisiana, was shot by a Bernie Sanders supporter, someone who would be in this group. So that's where the violence is coming from. But we need to keep everyone protected. And the funny thing is that Trump probably won't even be in the city that day. He'll probably be off doing something else, not fundraising. And Obama was good at that. Obama was also good at sending the DOJ into the Black Lives Matter protests to make sure civil rights weren't violated and that the marchers or the protesters were protected. So keep that in mind, Attorney General Sessions. And another thing, this Maxine Waters. I didn't know this woman had more than one brain cell, but apparently she has enough brain cells to fire up a crowd and tell President Trump that we're coming for you. And this woman, she's got the ugliest, wrinkly, baggy face you can imagine. And she's got on the James Brown wig. Like, it is the worst wig I've ever seen on another person. And she just looks horrible. But when she tells the crowds and gets them fired up and says that we're coming for Trump, I would like to know what she means by we're coming for Trump. And maybe the Secret Service needs to come and pay that woman a visit as well. Because we're coming for you, does that mean we're planning to assassinate you if you don't resign? Are we coming with you with articles of impeachment? Or are we just going to go and stand at your door and demand that you resign? What exactly does she mean by that? So I think she needs to be investigated. And anyone, if you live in her district or you know someone who does, please, please, please tell them to vote for her opponent. He will do a wonderful job as her replacement. His name is Omar Navarro, and you need to follow him. He's a rising star. He's Hispanic. He can speak Spanish, so he can habla to the other voting bloc in California. So I'm really hoping that this man succeeds, Maxine Waters. And one last thing. I'm glad. Thank you, President Trump, for pardoning Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Sheriff Joe, before the election, Eric Holder's DOJ went in, put him on charges of a political nature. This was a political witch hunt. This wasn't, for any law enforcement purposes. This was completely political, that they went after Sheriff Joe and had him convicted. He would have won the re-election had they not brought up these charges. And I'm glad to see that he was pardoned. And I'd kind of like to see Sheriff Joe challenge the traitor to America who also received a pardon. This senator received a pardon for treason from Richard Nixon, and his name is John McCain. I'd like to see him challenge John McCain for that Senate seat. And by the way, if you're a conservative, if you are not on the president's agenda, if you're not willing to support the president, then I am calling on everyone that we need to primary these people out. And if it is not a primary, vote for the Libertarian. Don't vote Democrat, vote for the Libertarian. Make the Libertarian Party a viable party in this country. And show these Republicans that if you're not on the side of our president, then we are not on the side of you. and we will primary you out, and we will vote you out, and we will vote for third parties. Because you're going to lose anyway, Ed Gillespie. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Ed. You're going to lose the election. So I'm not voting for you either. That's about all. I'll talk to you all later. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the weather wherever you are, and pray for Houston.